Interactive Systems and User Experience Research Cluster speaker series. Today we have somebody from EA Tiburon, Dr. Jim Cowan, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experiences at Electronic Arts and hopefully give you guys some insight into what it's like to work there and the types of skills that somebody might need to have to be successful at a place like EA Tiburon. So, without further ado, Tim, please.
Great, thank you. So, I guess before I start, since we got that kind of small group, I'm kind of curious, what areas you guys are pursuing degrees in. I'm assuming everyone's sort of student, faculty. How many engineers or computer science type people? Any business? So looks like mostly actually you're at least some sort of a technical or math or science background. That's good. A lot of this is kind of geared towards engineering and software development, which since my role is actually the group technical director. So while I'm not going to go super deep on the details of technology department because I can't share trade secrets and that kind of thing, but there will be a lot of engineering emphasis in this presentation. So before I get going, let me just do a little bit of an introduction. Who am I? What's my background? Where do I come from? I'm actually originally from Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and went to Oklahoma State University. And admittedly, like when I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And basically, my dad was a COBOL programmer. And I like to joke with him about how he's sort of a big dinosaur of programming. But I kind of went to college thinking I want to be a computer programmer like my dad, sort of as a default because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he actually encouraged me to not go after a computer science degree and go after what he'd called a more traditional engineering degree. And I went and got a mechanical engineering degree. That was my undergraduate degree. Found I really loved that, but looked for every opportunity I could to teach myself programming. I used programming, took programming classes, and tried to use programming to solve my mechanical engineering problems. Ultimately, stayed at Oklahoma State University and went on for an aerospace engineering degree. Found an advisor in my senior year that I really liked. He connected me with some research projects doing numerical simulation of aircraft, which was, again, a meld of programming with my engineering background. But let me kind of get the best of both worlds. And really kind of set my sights on, I guess at that point, my goal was to go be an astronaut. I was going to get a PhD in aerospace engineering and try to be a mission specialist and go into space. It's kind of, for a lot of people, a childhood dream to go into space and be an astronaut. Still really didn't know what I was going to do. Spent a lot of my time doing research for Dragonfly Research Center. Again, what I usually tell people is I worked on flight simulators for them, but not this type of flight simulator. It was actually this type of flight simulator. All computer modeling of aircraft, computational fluid dynamics, and structural dynamics of those aircraft. Ultimately, my PhD dissertation was on this gobbledygook. If you're ever really bored, go look that up and read about it. But at the end of the day, everyone at work knows me as a rocket scientist. I'm not a traditional game developer. I come from flight simulators, NASA, flight research, and everyone calls me a rocket scientist. But I actually never worked on rockets. It was actually rockets like this, actually aircraft. Never really did anything with space or astronautics. So that takes me to getting a job at EA. And it was in 2001 where I was looking for a job and thought, you know what, I'm going to go work at Lockheed Martin doing flight simulators for them. That's what I was trained to do, and what I actually, once I kind of gave up the astronaut idea, that's what I always thought I was going to do. And turns out I put my resume on the internet, monster.com in particular, which was hot at that time, and a recruiter contacted me and told me about a position in Austin working on Madden PC. So it was Madden PC 2002 was actually my first title that I worked on working at Tiburon from Austin. Eventually they relocated me out here and the rest of my team and became a part of the bigger Madden organization. And I've been working on Madden continuously since 2002. I've helped shift, including this year, 14 versions of Madden at this point. It's been 13 years of EA. I've worked on 20 plus different titles, but the thing I'd say I'm most proud of is that I've worked on contiguous versions of Madden going all the way back to 2002. Held a lot of different roles in the engineering department, from graphics to UI, to gameplay, physics, just about every aspect of game development. I'd say that these are the most recent titles that we just put out this year, Madden 25, which is 25 years of Madden, which is why it was numbered a little bit of people, if anybody noticed that. I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is graphics. I'm kind of more a graphics guy, and I think the thing I'm most proud of in our Madden titles is the graphics that we put into them. And these days, Madden is very realistic. It really does. In a lot of cases, we can put up a screenshot and kind of look at it. You have to look at it twice. Was that actually something that came off your TV from Sunday, or is that a video game? This year's Madden on Xbox One, really started to pursue that likeness and get to that visual fidelity where that's really starting to look like RG3 at this point. So today, at the studio, I'm actually in charge of all engineering at the studio for all the sports products that we build, which is today it's 4 titles. Madden, no longer build college football at Tiburon due to some legal issues by the way. But we have Madden, Tiger Woods, now actually known as just PGA Tour Golf, NBA Live, and some mobile development. There is actually a full version of Madden Mobile, which you can download and play on your phone today. So, the meat of the talk, what I want to talk about is a little bit of just the evolution of Madden for the last 25 years, since this actually was the 25th anniversary this year. We're going to go start at the dawn of time and look at what did the first version of Madden look like and how it's evolved over the years. Because it's changed dramatically if you've seen the franchise over the past 25 years. The first version of Madden was actually built for the Apple PC, the Apple IIe, I think it was. It was actually built by, I think it was 2 people. One engineer built the entire game. And there was one designer, probably some producers and marketing people. We're talking about a fairly small job to build the first version of Madden on the Apple. But really things get going in what we call Generation 0 of video games. And that Generation 0 spans from 91 to 96 and was really dominated by the Sega Genesis, I'd say. This was an era where video games were built primarily in writing and assembly language. Still fairly small teams, you're talking 3 or 4 engineers to put out a title, 1 artist, a pretty small group, writing primarily in assembly, and you've got 2D, very flat, pixelated graphics. It's interesting to note that at the same time in the movie industry, 1995, kind of the end of that generation, where the games were sprite-based, flat, 2D, Toy Story hits the market. You notice there's a huge visual difference between Madden at that time period, video games in general at that time period, and what you'd see on the movie screen in terms of visual fidelity for Toy Story. I'll come back to that later. But really, I'd say movies is one of the things that we look at as one of our competitions in terms of entertainment. And so this is something that we were chasing at the time, and no way that we could achieve. So move on to the next generation, Gen 1, 96 to 2001. This would be your PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64. And this slide actually has kind of a side-by-side comparison of last gen and this gen. You can see some differences. It goes from what was purely 2D sprite-based to this is actually the first introduction of 3D graphics. It was actually at the tail end of this cycle. The first games that came out on this platform in this generation were still sprite 2D based, still primarily written in assembly. But what you see is the shift to, at the tail end of this generation, 3D graphics, actually 3D polygonal models. Team sizes got a little bit bigger. We're probably talking 10 to 15 people to build the title. And there was a shift to some coding in C. So the industry was evolving. And then where you really take the big jump is on Gen 2, where you go from somewhat pixelated attempt at 3D graphics to true 3D graphics. This was the PlayStation 2 era. PlayStation 2 launches in 2001, and that's really where the video game industry explodes, because in part, the visual fidelity jump in terms of that entertainment and what you could see on your screen really went up a notch. In Madden 2001, I think, at least internally, we always say this was one of the defining launch titles for that platform. Madden on the PlayStation 2 was probably one of the most purchased titles for people who were picking up the PlayStation 2. What title do you get? You get Madden and you get one other title because it was one of the best looking launch titles on that platform. It really kind of defined that platform. And throughout the PlayStation 2 era, sports titles really were one of the platform defining titles on that platform. So your next jump is Gen 3. One other comment on PlayStation 2. So again, this is actually about when I started, so 2001. PlayStation 2 had just come out. I was working on PC and actually helped with the GameCube launch and the Xbox launch in 2002. So team sizes here were getting a little bit bigger, still about a 20 to 30 person team depending on the product. And at the tail end of this cycle, we shifted from what was primarily C programming to C++. So Gen 3 comes onto the market in 2006 with the Xbox 360. Again, a big visual leap in terms of what the hardware was capable and what you could see in terms of pixels on the screen. Going deeper down in visual realism and actual gameplay realism, physics and animation, and those types of things. This generation was actually the shift to multi-core processors. The Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3 all had multiple processors, multiple cores that you had to deal with. And you really saw, it was also the jump to HD graphics for your HD televisions. You really saw a huge jump in terms of the size of the development team and the demands of the development team to drive the visual quality that you see on the screen. Team sizes in this era, primarily C++ development still, as a carryover from the prior generation. The team sizes in this generation are upwards of 200 to 250 people for these really large teams. I'll talk a little bit more about that sort of towards the end. But video games in this generation really became a big budget because of the demands of the hardware and the demands of what the consumers wanted in terms of what they wanted to see. And this is the generation where it really felt like we started to master that screenshot, where you look at this screenshot and at least at first glance it looks very realistic. There's obviously things that you're going to pick out if you really look at it, but it's CG. But there's a lot of detail that starts to be built into the screen. And for me, one of the key points kind of to think about for video games that really is unique for video game is at the tail end of that generation, we're really starting to maximize the hardware. You've got 7-year-old hardware that you're working with, which you're trying to maximize your visual fidelity on the screen, versus PCs that are changing constantly every single year. Technology is changing constantly, and you've got PCs that can constantly deliver better and better performance. we're kind of working on, at the tail end of this generation, fixed hardware for 7 years, trying to maximize and continuously improve every single year what the product looks like. And it runs at 60 frames per second in real time. And when you look at that, the amount of fidelity and effects and things that we're able to put into that screen at 60 frames per second is, for me at least, fairly impressive. Things like three-dimensional grass, lens glare effects, self-shadows. There's a lot of detail that really goes into constructing that image that goes on the screen, and it all runs in real time at 60 frames per second. If you're not familiar with what that means, you've got about 16 milliseconds to construct that frame and put all of that detail into the frame in order to maintain that 60 frames per second. And that's a constant battle that video game engineers have to work against. How do I squeeze every little detail into that screen in 16 milliseconds? So kind of going back to that movie comparison, this kind of shows along the same timeline the evolution of video games and the evolution of Toy Story. And I think it's kind of interesting, again, when you think about what we're able to do in terms of 60 frames per second and pack into that screen. There's been a dramatic evolution from 2D graphics to full 3D graphics with blown-out effects. Versus, I'm not saying Toy Story didn't improve. There's a ton more detail in that 2010 image versus their 1990s image. But they're able to work on the latest and greatest PCs that are constantly getting faster, constantly getting better, and they don't have that limitation that it has to be rendered down in real time. Some of their frames may take an entire day to generate. We have to generate every single one of our frames in real time at 60 frames per second. And so the evolution, at least, we're starting to catch up with movies. Definitely Toy Story still looks better today, and always will, because of the constraints versus ours. But what we're able to do in real time really is starting to compete with the graphics that you're going to see on the movie screen. And honestly, movies today is one of the things we really consider one of our top competitors. Video games are part of the entertainment industry. And every game we build at EA is an entertainment product. So everything from Mass Effect, boxing, it's just kind of highlights a few of the things that EA puts out. FIFA, and our other sports products, Battlefield, and of course Madden. So, what really does distinguish a video game is that it's entertainment, it's interactive entertainment. You get to engage and interact with that entertainment, change the outcomes in a lot of cases, especially in a football game. You decide who wins and loses. You make choices on how the outcome of that entertainment is going to play out. It's not just go in and sit and have the experience. Certainly, the goal of a movie in a lot of cases is for you to sit down and have an emotional experience with that movie and enjoy it. As an entertainment industry, that's one of the same goals for video games, but it's also interactive, and the user can change the outcomes. And if you remember the dates on those different generations, one thing that was unique in this last generation is it was actually the longest generation. It had a 7-year gap between consoles. And the previous generations were really only 5 years, maybe less. But one of the innovations that really came out of this most recent generation, especially in terms of interaction, has been input controls. And this somewhat elongated the last generation, where it gave you new ways to play on a console that was aging. And certainly the Wiimote was one of the most disruptive innovations in terms of controls that came on the market. And then Microsoft and Sony follow with their Kinect and PlayStation Eye inputs to give users new ways to interact with their entertainment. And the other big thing with this generation, this Gen 3, was online gaming. There was online gaming in the PS2 generation, but I'd say it was a new feature that games were starting to try out. online gaming is core and at the forefront of the current generation. It's no longer, especially for Madden, about sitting on your couch and beating your friend that's sitting next to you. It's about engaging with an online community and competing against everyone in that broader online community in your entertainment. And it's just interesting, one thing that our sports games can do today is put out big numbers and very impressive statistics. It's just interesting, especially for this online service, this online community of people playing games today. If you compare FIFA 14 and the number of minutes that gamers have played in that product versus how many minutes have been played in the real world that people community, there's a stunning amount of football video games being played relative to the real world soccer games being played. So, what's next? That kind of gets us up to Xbox 360. As I'm guessing a lot of you are aware, we just saw the launch of new consoles prior to Christmas last year. Xbox One, PlayStation 4 hit the market. So starting in 2013 to who knows how long this generation will last. Obviously, we love it to last as long as possible. Keep people engaged with those systems and libraries. But when we look at those consoles and what the future brings, we think about what EA Sports pillars, what our goals are. And one of the mottos that EA Sports has had forever is, if it's in the game, it's in the game. And what that really means is realism and authenticity. That's what defines an EA Sports video game. And so when you look at the future and what the new hardware gives us in terms of potential, it's a lot of sort of sustaining some of the innovations I talked about already. Really pushing out, how do we get more realism into our games, more authenticity, so that the things that you see on Sunday, everyone knows what Peyton Manning looks like. Maybe not everyone, but if you're a Broncos fan or a Colts fan, you know what Peyton Manning looks like. You watch him on Sunday. You know what his mannerisms are, how he plays the game, what he does, and we need to replicate that in our video game. Everything from high-flying tackles, physics, player-to-player interactions, degradation on the uniforms, jersey pulls where the jerseys can move, physics on the jersey, physics on the hair, bringing more and more realism so that everything you see on your television on Sunday, you see in our video game. Detail on the fans, steam coming off the fans' heads, going deeper and deeper with that visual and gameplay realism, which in a lot of cases, we are doing better. With the first game that comes out on a new generation of hardware, you never fully realize the potential of that hardware. And so we'll continue to go deeper and deeper with that. And it's one of the things that's most important for our sports video games. Because, again, if you're a Redskins fan, you know what RG3 looks like. And if you see him in Madden on your screen, you will know what's wrong with that image. Why that isn't quite RG3. It's a thing we call the uncanny valley in computer graphics, where we can get really close to representing a human, both visually and in motion and behaviors in a computer. But there will always be something subtly wrong, something subtly off, that will make you realize that's not a real person. And I really feel like we've gotten close to mastering that uncanny valley in terms of the screenshot. But I guarantee you, if this was a video and I put this guy in motion, you'd go, yeah, that's not how RG3 moves. That's not how he walks. That's not how he talks. Because you see him on TV, you see him playing the game, you see him in interviews, and you can make that direct connection to the video and what's missing. And I think that's actually somewhat unique in a sports game, because you have that direct connection to the sport. You know what the sport looks like, you know what the players look like. Not many people have been in a war. We don't know what it's like to be in a war. We've probably never seen a missile in real life launched off of a cannon. There's certainly been movies about it. I'm guessing that those are pretty close to reality. But we've never personally experienced that in real life. So in a lot of cases, at least for me, if you're working on more of a fantasy game, whether it's Battlefield or say Dragon Age, I don't know what this guy's supposed to look like in real life. He kills dragons. I've never seen him in real life. I don't know how he's supposed to walk, how he's supposed to talk. In a lot of cases, the uncanny valley, I think we suspend our disbelief when we're playing a fantasy game. Versus when you're in a sports game, it's much easier to go, something's not quite right there because I know what that looks like in real life. It's one of the biggest challenges in sports video gaming that we talk about, that we have to nail this, and our standard for how close to real it is much higher than a lot of cases of fantasy game. So a lot of that, going deeper with visual realism, going deeper with AI and physics, and sort of what you see on the screen. A lot of that's what I call, I think I mentioned it before, it's a sustainable innovation. It's taking the innovations we've done every year and doing better with them. And it's what everyone expects. Everyone expects us to keep sustaining those innovations. It's real interesting to start to think about, and I don't have any answers here, but what might be the disruptions in the future? Where's the future going? And to think about that, think a little bit about society. Society's changing a lot. And what are consumers going to want? What do they need? Why are they going to play a video game? Is key to kind of understanding what might happen in the future and what we need to go. So, one thing I've observed, just even personally in my life, I'm sure a lot of people are running things. There's technology everywhere these days. It's very rare that you sit down and do just one thing anymore. You've always got your phone, your laptops, the TV's on, you may have music playing. We have access to technology and information everywhere, and we're constantly multitasking. I think everyone's probably seen a picture of this variety somewhere where everyone's always on their phone, no matter where they are, what they're doing. We're always multitasking. And multitasking is actually one of the things that's becoming one of the new norms in society. There's been some studies around the number of simultaneous tasks that people in current generations today are capable of doing versus what prior generations, just because of the immersion and you're brought up in a multitasking environment, you're immersed in it, and it becomes your new norm and you're capable of doing it. So multitasking continues to be on the rise, and just the impact of technology and things like social media, your cell phones, continues to really change society and how people think, what they do, and what they're looking for in terms of entertainment. There's one interesting thing to note on this slide. If you look at the generations that it has there, the length of the generation is getting smaller. I think that first generation was about 18 years, and that's a 15-year gap, let's say, 11-year gap. I was actually in a presentation recently where they were talking about the next generation that's coming up now. I don't know if they've been officially labeled, but they're what they call the digital natives. It's everyone who's 17 and under today. They're talking about a generation that was brought up where technology is the norm. Cell phones with touch screens, iPads, those things are normal. And they're coming to be adults in a society where all those things are normal. And the technology advances are continuing to accelerate. And what that's doing is actually shrinking the length of the generation. And I was actually quoted that the length of the generation today is about 7 years, and it's getting smaller because things are changing so fast. And what's driving that is technology. There's a synthesis here. Technology is changing. It's changing society. I've even heard of it mentioned as technology is the next form of evolution. Biologically, our bodies aren't really evolving anymore, but technology is evolving us. Our minds are evolving, and society is changing, and our perceptions are changing. So, realistically, if you're familiar with Moore's Law, which probably most people have heard of before, Moore's Law continues, and that's one of the big drivers for this. The number of transistors between an Atari 2600 from 1977 to a PlayStation 2 today at the same price point. It's staggering how quickly things are changing. The cell phone that I carry around in my pocket today is more powerful than a supercomputer from the 60s that took up a room probably this size. I can carry that around with me and do more with it and have access to more than I ever did. The internet and our access, basically the conduit of our access to information and how we connect is everywhere. And it gives us access to data at a scale that no one ever would have even thought of when computers were first. So, there's other trends in technology. Things that are coming out of this rapid change in computing power and access to data in terms of wearable technology. I think I actually have one of those on my wrist, activity monitors that are very disruptive and kind of bringing the technology to the athletic industry and the fitness industry. So these things are continuing to evolve in terms of how we interact with computers, how we interact with technology, potentially how we interact with video games. Google Glass, I don't know if that one in particular will be successful. It's definitely a possible disruptor coming to us in the future. And they actually kind of evolved to 3D contacts, wearable contacts on your eyes that give you a virtual reality screen right on your eye. That's more a concept than it is something that's actually in development, but potentially one of the leaps that we could look at. I've actually got a video here, an extrapolation of what society might look like as these technological innovations continue to advance. It's actually in 3D, so the screen is a little bit funny. Since you don't have 3D glasses, but I think you kind of be able to get the point. It may not have sound. Kind of see through his augmented reality, whether it's contacts or glasses or whatever it is, he almost lives in a virtual environment. He just sort of was in a coffee shop and projected his own virtual environment into that area. It's kind of interesting to think if you're in the advertising or marketing field, how do you advertise to these people? You get marketing messages in front of them. As they walk down the street. If you're walking down the street, you don't like the scenery, you can change the world, or at least how you're perceiving the world. So obviously these people are true multitaskers. And then I've got one other video, which is a little bit more gaming focused. What my gaming look like in the future. Will not play over to the sound actually seems like it got out of sync. All right, well, the idea here, this guy's literally just in his apartment with nothing. He actually doesn't even have a TV anywhere. He's playing a virtual reality game. See if I can jump ahead here. He's playing a virtual reality game where he's someplace completely else. I'm falling through the sky, playing the skydiving game. Just laying on the floor of his apartment. I think it kind of, since it's not playing particularly well, let's skip the rest of it. And it kind of goes to a few more other things where he interacts with his entire apartment through virtual reality. So again, don't know when. Virtual reality is definitely at the forefront of a lot of people's minds these days. One possible view of the future, and certainly one thing that we're keeping our eye on in terms of how our video games will need to evolve in order to adapt to virtual reality as an input device. So let me reel us back a minute. Kind of went through the evolution of video games, tried to think about a little bit about the future. Let me just talk about Madden today, what development looks like, and really kind of the goal here is to get an idea of what it's like to build Madden today, and what you need to be successful as an engineer in particular, but really anyone who works, whether you're a designer, an artist, a producer, or an engineer, kind of a lot of the philosophy that I look at in terms of what you need to be successful as an employee. Because while, I could definitely run through and say, well, at least for the engineers, it's like you need to have the programming in C++ really well. You got to have a good math background. You got to be a problem solver, that kind of stuff. Probably heard all of that before. So this is a little bit more about some of my philosophy about what makes a good engineer and what you need to do to get a job in the game industry. So if you look at Madden, these are the NPD rankings, which is video game sales in North America. Madden's primarily a North American only title. The NFL is really popular in North America, not so popular in Europe and other areas. But Madden is a top 3 title every year in North America. It's big. And even you compare that to FIFA in this particular year, they were number 10 in North America. I can tell you, FIFA globally outsells Madden 3-1. So if I had a global sales chart, FIFA would be way at the top, and Madden would be quite a bit farther down. But EA is a North American company, so the success of Madden in North America is very important to EA and something very important to our studio, obviously. Top 3 title every year in North America. And ultimately, Madden is one of those titles that really drives EA's stock price. Success or failure for Madden is a big deal to EA as a company. Battlefield, FIFA, Madden, really three of the biggest titles the EA builds. The business that's riding on those titles, the success or failure of those titles in the market for EA as a public company is huge. So a few stats, just what the development team looks like today. And this was actually maybe a little dated. I think this included our college football development team as well, where we had 240 developers on staff. That's on the direct core team that does development on the products. There's also a variety of central teams. A lot of people contribute to building a video game these days. But sort of on the direct core team at the studio, we have 240 developers, and 60% of those are software engineers. So well over 100 software engineers contributing directly to building that. It's about 10 million lines of code, just sort of directionally. I count those physical lines of code, so it includes white space and things like that. And about 150,000 files. And Madden is not just built in Tiburon. EA is a global company. Our primary sports locations are actually in Orlando and Vancouver. But we also have satellite development in Austin, which is where I originally started. BioWare has a very large studio in Austin. We have a few people that work for sports in Austin. And we also have a contractor in Nova Scotia. So it's large-scale development across multiple locations. And really, the message there is Madden's big. Both a business in terms of sales and importance to EA, and in terms of size of the development team. And it's important to know that because it's definitely not the days of you and a few other people go and build a video game for one of the major state-of-the-art consoles that sits there on the living room. It takes a big team to put out Madden every year. And that big team puts Madden out every single year. It's one of the other defining characteristics of a sports video game. These games come out every single year. If you're familiar with Battlefield, Battlefield actually comes out every other year. In a lot of cases, there's a EA alternates which first-person shooter that comes out every year. Battlefield one year, and then last year we had a Medal of Honor title, and then they came out with Battlefield again. But a lot of titles are on more of a 2-year iterative cycle. Our sports titles are on a 1-year iterative cycle. Basically, it's like clockwork. The NFL season starts in August. Madden comes out in August. And that's a defining characteristic of our sports video games. There is a date when they come out every year and set your watch to it. Unlike some other titles that you may or may not be familiar with, some of these, they're done when they're done. In some cases, they're never done. This is actually one of the EA titles, something that they posted when they announced that next year's Edge game is going to come out. It's coming when it's ready. We definitely don't say that in sports. That doesn't work. Our sports games come out at the same time every year, reliably and consistently. And we've built a studio and a culture that drives that sort of repeatable, sustainable process to put that title out every year. Certainly, making video games is complicated, especially when over 240 people contribute to it. So there's not always like a clear map, and it's certainly not a straight line. And you've got to organize the chaos and how you get that going on every year. And we've built processes, built the studio and the culture around how do you methodically go through, what are the checkpoints along the way, how do you check things off your to-do list to make sure that game is going to come out, because if that game doesn't come out, EA is going to have problems. That will impact our stock price. Not to mention our consumers aren't going to be happy because they're expecting that game. They want that game. So one thing to think about, especially for sports development, is an engineer coming in, you have to embrace iteration. you have to be ready for that iterative cycle. It's very predictable. You can't get everything done in one given year. It's more of an iterative evolution, especially for Madden, where year over year, the game has to get better, and we continue to iterate on it, continue to build on it, continue to do the things that we need to do to get the game out every year, which sometimes means that since you don't have 2 years to build it, you don't have all the time in the world, you have to make sure that you're focused on getting that product out this year and making the right decisions in terms of how we iterate and get it done. You really have to, like I said, enjoy that schedule, the predictability, which in a lot of cases I think most engineers love predictability. We love that when I program on the computer, the output that I get is predictable. In this case, the schedule that you have is very predictable. You know what you're going to be doing, you know what you have to do, and get it done. So, the next thing is, how do engineers solve big problems? And I like to kind of talk about the engineering mindset versus the science mindset. You've got to be a problem solver. You've got to be the fix-it guy. You've got to love problems and challenges and want to fix them. I'm going to grossly oversimplify this, but what I usually tell people, there's at least to me, a big philosophical difference between science and engineering. Science is, for me in a lot of cases, is about the idea. It's figuring out how things work, the laws of the universe, how do all the mechanical and scientific processes, biological processes, how do things work? You're pursuing an idea to figure out how things work. And the goal really is to figure out how it works. In a lot of cases, you can kind of oversimplify things. I don't know what I'm going to do with it once I figure out how it works. It's just the pursuit of that knowledge, the pursuit of the idea is what's important. And engineers then take what the scientists learned and go, all right, that's how things work. I'm going to put these things together and I'm going to make something with it. Engineers, at least for me, are makers. We take the body of scientific knowledge and we build things. We figure out what it's going to cost, how we're going to do it, and solve those practical problems based on the body of scientific knowledge. So it's really about that problem solver mindset that I think every engineer's got to have. You've got to be able to look at some practical problem and say, I'm going to figure out how to solve that. And there is a way to solve it. There are no Kobayashi Marus if you're a Star Trek fan. The unwinnable scenario, that can't be beaten. Especially in the sports iterative development cycle, you don't want to hear from the engineering team. Certainly, no one wants to hear from me that, no, there is no way that we can get physics into the game this year. There is no unwinnable scenario. There's always a way to get it done. We have to figure out how to get it done, what it's going to cost, and can we get it done on the schedule that we have in front of us? Because there is no mission impossible, so to speak. So I did kind of like this quote. Again, this is a big part of my job today is in a lot of cases sort of leading the studio in how we're going to solve those biggest problems. It's core to my belief, and it's core to the culture of the studio that there is nothing that's impossible. We just have to figure out how to fix it, how to get it done, and when we're going to get it done. So we might not get it done this year. It might take us 2 years through that iterative process. You really got to have that enthusiasm to go build a great game and solve those big problems. So really, the big idea, challenge the impossible. And I really try to think about that every day that I come to work. How am I going to solve that impossible problem today? Or how am I going to get us on the path to solve that impossible problem? So next I would like to dispel a myth. And there's an age-old engineering myth of the perfect code. There is no perfect code that can tell you. But engineers love to argue about perfect code, especially on a big team, 100+ engineers. My code's better than yours. I don't believe in this coding standard, that coding standard. Engineers, in a lot of cases, have what we call the not enough peer syndrome, where if I didn't write it, it's not good. Now, the reality is, no one writes perfect code because there is no perfect code, and no one writes the best code the first time. If you kind of go back to the previous point on embracing iteration, you want to write that code, and it's going to evolve over time and it's better over time. But mistakes are going to be made, and those are part of the process. And that's one of the things that's very core to my beliefs. Is, it's fairly cliche, but you learn more from mistakes than you do from failures. You have to make mistakes in order to evolve, in order to get better. If you never make a mistake, you're not ready. You never write code that's perfect the first time, because there will be bugs, there will be mistakes, and you iterate on that code, and it gets better, and you become a better programmer because of it. There is no bug-free guarantee, and I can tell you, on our projects today, there are tens of thousands of bugs in Outlook when we're trying to find on that project. And realistically, I look at those as every one of those, we call them all a mistake. They're all a learning opportunity. They're all about how you get better and get to that as close as possible to perfect code. So while there is no perfect code, counterpoint to that is in a lot of cases for our sports products, really, I think engineering in particular, you need to value proven code. Code that's been through that software development life cycle has gotten many of the bugs shaken out of it. It's proven. It shipped. It shipped last year. You may not understand it. You may not have written it yourself. But one of the things that's most valuable is that code is proven. This has as many of the known bugs as possible worked out of it. So the last point is about, on the big team, you're going to be given a lot of tasks, things that you have to do. Mark these boxes. Not a good programmer, but there's a lot of tasks, and all those tasks plug in together to build some sort of a picture. And it's often hard on a big project when you're working on your tasks to figure out how does my task relate up to the bigger picture. And in a lot of cases, what I'm looking for, especially in an engineer, is someone who's not just thinking about their task, but does think about that big picture. How does it connect to the bigger world? And this is actually a quote from someone who worked on appliance factory floor, where if you've been doing tasks every day, coming to work, doing this task, no one ever told him why he was doing that task. And if someone had told him why he was doing that task, then what he said was, you could have had my brain, and I could have told you there's a better way for you to do this task that would save us money. And so, part of my job and the leaders of the team is to make sure that everyone understands how their task rolls up into the bigger picture. And everyone's constantly got to be thinking about, I'm not just doing a task, I'm not just trying to get this done, but I'm trying to get a feature done, and it's a piece that contributes to a whole. And you really have to understand what it is that you're trying to build, because everyone may have a different idea of what it is that you're trying to build. But if you all understand exactly what the customer wants, what they need, and what we're trying to build, then you all get aligned on building that and contributing to it, and you don't end up building the wrong thing because it was a collection of tasks and people working independently to build the wrong thing. So the big idea is, well, you'll be given a lot of tasks in your career if you are an engineer, a software engineer. Try not to think about just the task and how do I get the task done. You got to relate that task back to what it's contributing to you, what feature you're building. How does that task contribute back to the overall goal? Focus on that to make sure that you're doing the right thing with your task. Because at the end of the day, what you're building is features for gamers. The gamers don't know about your tasks. You're trying to get something amazing to these guys' games so you can play it. But at the end of the day, you don't want to have unfinished projects because tasks fell through the cracks, weren't quite done right, and didn't contribute to that goal. Mistakes will be made. And it's important to remember when those mistakes are made that they're a learning opportunity, and if everyone's focused on features and not tasks, they were trying to do the right thing for what they saw as the end goal. Failure will happen. There will be bugs, but we're all on the same team, contributing tasks to features to get to an end goal. And it's really important on the big team to remember that everyone's on the same team, we're all working towards the same goal. We're all trying to deliver the same game, and we all have to work together. Super important, I know every sports team knows this inherently. We're stronger as a team versus as individuals, at least in team sports. So while we're working on our tasks, as mistakes are made, on a big team, one of the big things is to remember is everyone wants the project to succeed. And everyone's contributing to that project to help achieve a common goal. So in summary, the 5 points I was trying to get across in terms of at least my personal philosophy, and I think the attitude that you have to bring to be successful in a large engineering team where you're working against an iterative cycle on a predictable schedule to deliver a big budget game with 200 other people, or to embrace iteration, challenge the impossible, make sure that you're not arguing over perfect code, but instead valuing proven code to contribute to get your tasks done, deliver features for the good of the team. And that's a lot of the culture that we try to build within our sports studios in terms of how a high-performing team delivers a sports game every single year, or even, again, the sports analogy, how a high-performing team wins the Super Bowl every year. So, that's it. What I wanted to do guys with.
So we have some time for questions. Anybody have any questions for Tom?
Yep.
So, I guess it seems to me like the release cycles for games now have gotten shorter over like the last decade. I remember like used to be like 3 to 5 years for a game to go out, and then now it's like 2 years. I'm like so like what's driving that shortening?
So a couple things. Definitely, I'd say what you're seeing in the industry today. So sports titles still matter every single year. And that's been consistent basically for 25 years. But yes, I definitely agree that you've got several other titles, especially like Call of Duty, Battlefield, the 2 big shooters. They're on basically a 2-year cycle today. A lot of what you're seeing in the industry today that we talk about is really it's the big titles, the top 10 that make the majority of sales today. And so what you're seeing is the biggest titles, the biggest brands. That's what the customers go line up at the stores. Those are what the big launches are. That's what everyone wants. Everyone wants the next generation of Call of Duty. They want the next generation of Battlefield, and that desire is, in a lot of regards, insatiable. So what you've seen is the industry kind of shift and collect on those big titles, those big brands, and really driving them and getting them to market faster. Because that's what's driving a lot of the sales and the growth in the industry. So I think you're kind of seeing it in that, the industry is shifting to what they're seeing as consumer desires, what the customers want, based on what's selling. And there are a lot of titles where you see them kind of emerge out of nowhere. I could say like it was Star Wars a few years ago. They kind of burst onto the market, had huge sales. It was kind of like it wasn't one of those established big brands. It's really hard to get one of those new franchises into that top 10 so that they sell big. When you have a 200-person team building it, you've got to have that big hit. It's got to be in the top 10 in order for the sales to work out. And then once you've got a hit, everyone kind of starts driving that hit. Goes to that next iteration to kind of keep that momentum going and keep consumers coming back and lining up to buy that thing. So I think that's a lot of what you're seeing. There are still absolutely some titles that are on 3 and 4 year cycles. They're kind of elongating that.
I have one question that from the EA perspective, how do you feel the success of the Steam from the Valve? What is the relationship like in the future? How do you feel that EA will create some kind of same such the collaboration, the online game, the market?
For Steam?
Yeah, for Steam, yeah.
So I guess it was about a year, 2 years ago, and EA actually started building their own digital platform and their own, basically a competitor with Steam to go to market to do direct sales of EA titles called Origin. So there's been, I guess, since that point, a little bit of conflict between EA and Steam, and where a lot of our EA titles are actually exclusive on Origin. I believe Battlefield is exclusive on Origin and not available on Steam. So today, I don't believe EA has very many titles available on Steam because they're all going to EA's platform, competitive competing platform, where we manage direct sales to customers through Origin. Certainly, I know Steam is looking at the Steam box and kind of bring a console-like experience to the living room. And that's obviously something that EA will continue to watch and monitor. And if it grows and if there's a market there, I would expect that EA would be there for these titles. Because obviously, our goal is to get our titles in front of the customers that want them. If there's a big market there, desire for our titles on the Steam box, I would expect that EA will be there. And it's basically EA watching that market and figuring out whether there's an opportunity or not.
And then the question, with the new consoles that came out, how did that change your development cycle? You said you have a yearly cycle. How much lead time did you have to have added on to learn the new hardware? All that. I'm curious how that transition happened, or how the team maybe changed sizes.
Yep. So definitely with our sports iterative cycle, anything that breaks that iterative cycle is actually, it's very hard for us to accommodate. And we have to very intentionally build a strategy around it. Because it doesn't fit in the rhythm of our business in terms of how we put Madden out in August every year. Oh, wait a minute, there's another version of Madden coming out in November. So we definitely adapt. We do get some amount of lead time. Obviously, we find out about the new hardware well before the customers do, well before it's ever publicly announced. It goes under NDA, there's secret project codes. It's anywhere from 18 to 24 months prior to launch that you even find out. The nice thing about this generation, if you looked at hardware specs, kind of compare the Xbox One versus Xbox 360, if you're with me with that when Xbox 360 launched, it jumped from PlayStation 2, Xbox One, or Xbox One, the original Xbox, to the Xbox 360. We went from standard definition, basically single core, to high definition multi-core. Those two things together at once in that transition were huge for the teams to sort of to adjust to. The scale required to really deliver high definition graphics in terms of assets and engineering, parts and engineering, was a huge jump versus the prior generation. And the engine changes that we have made to the multi-core really required a fundamental rewrite to our engine. So that was a very difficult transition for EA and Madden in particular. This transition is still HD, so the count of pixels hasn't really changed, and it's still multi-core, but there's more cores, more powerful, there's more memory. It was less of a adjustment for this generation for sure. There was more fine-tuning the existing engine and really bringing the engine over and then focusing on what did we need to do to make an amazing on this platform versus the prior generation we really had to retool everything. Our philosophy was to bring the engine over, get it working so that you could see the game on the screen as soon as possible and then focus on how do you make that experience amazing on this new hardware. So it was definitely an easier transition for us, just in terms of technological hurdles that had to overcome. We did have to overcome the scheduling hurdle. It was still a significant investment, because it is any time you do if you need to do hardware. But basically, carved up the team, got a group working in parallel, and was able to spend a much longer cycle than we normally would have to get that membership date.
Sorry, I'd like to know from where do you get more requests, from gaming, mobile gaming, or console gaming? Also, I'd like to know why do we have one version like for mobile and one version for console? Like why the FIFA I play in my phone is not data related to the FIFA I play on Xbox.
What was the first question?
About from where do you get more requests, from mobile gaming or from console gaming?
Definitely, I guess just in terms of requests, at least from Madden in particular. Our biggest sales are on console. Our biggest user base is on console. So I'd say in terms of like requests and customer requests and feedback on the game, the majority of it comes
No,
from
I was
console
thinking
space.
actually at the HTTP request.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So HTTP requests in terms of
To the server.
to the server,
Yes.
it's still going to be in the console space because that's where we get the most usage. For Madden, I think we actually peak out around 100,000 users simultaneously online on our console games, and a total consumer base of 5 million plus. And then Madden on the console is always online, it's always connected, at least if you have an internet connection. So our servers are getting vast majority of lead requests from the console product. Mobile is if you look at the mobile space, there are more mobile devices that are games capable out in people's hands than there are consoles for sure. The mobile market dwarfs, the potential mobile market dwarfs the console market. Madden in particular, being North American only, that's one of our huge growth opportunities is really taking that business to the next level, trying to get more people engaged with Madden on their phone. But it's still one of those that, if you look at, I'd say the console industry is very mature at this point. The mobile industry is still growing and figuring out its path forward, especially for Madden, where we're trying to figure out what is the right game people want to play on their phone or on their tablet in terms of the Madden experience. Because Madden, your mobile experience is very different. When you're playing a console game, you sit down on your couch, you've got HD graphics, and you're immersed in that experience. Most people, at least what I think that a lot of people want, because it's certainly what I want in terms of a mobile gaming experience. I'm on the move. I've got 5 minutes between meetings. I pop up my phone, mess around on my phone, play a little game. It's a much more casual experience where you're using that experience in between other things in a lot of cases because you're on the go, you're busy, you're multitasking. It's sort of not the same experience where you're sitting on the couch and immersing in your entertainment experience. It's one of the distractions in your very, very busy life. You don't necessarily sit down with your tablet or your phone, at least today. I don't. I know a lot of people don't really sit down and immerse in a mobile experience. So our mobile experiences tend to be kind of catered to that lifestyle where it's a short, interactive experience that you're going to interact with throughout the day in little gaps and breaks in your day.
For instance, when you were trading players in FIFA, sometimes it's much easier to do it on your phone than to wait to go home. That's just a case that I like to highlight. Why it should be nice to have like both versions together, and at least like
on a lot of, you will find, at least for our console games, that most of our console games have companion experiences. There's like a mobile app that allows you to do management type things that do actually tie back to the console, or the web experience on the PC that ties back to the console. So there's sort of this connected universe for FIFA in particular, where you've got the FIFA console game. I know there are companion apps for your phone and web apps for your PC that allow you to kind of interact with that console experience and do some player training. I believe it's the FIFA mobile game itself. It's like a standalone, separate game. It doesn't tie back into that experience.
With respect to like the user experience and player feedback, do you find that something like visual fidelity is something that players put more emphasis on because it's a sports title? Is that like a bottom-up driven process, or like a top-down thing where you just decide that we're going to try to make this across the board as realistic as possible? Or can you find, like from research and player feedback, that people will say, like, I want to see steam coming off the heads of the fans in the stands and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's one thing in the video game industry, you need to have thick skin. If you go on the message boards, people love to hate video games.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm saying, is it something that is it unique to sports titles, like stuff like that? Or?
No, I'd say the first thing you notice with a video game is the visual experience, the fidelity of that visual experience. And everyone's different in terms of what they're looking for in that experience, but it's the first thing that you notice. And so it tends to be, in terms of priorities, it's like one of the number one priorities is making sure that visual experience, the first thing that you see, is rock solid and hits whatever the bullet points happen to be in terms of the most realistic, authentic experience ever. Steam coming off the players' heads, that's probably a little bit more personal, where some people really want that, some don't. But there's definitely like a amalgamation of feedback on message boards and consumer forums, for Madden in particular, that our designers go through. Then we read all of the reviews every year from all the major publications and kind of look at what the feedback is. What are people telling us that they most want to see for that visual experience in Madden? We'll try to drive those things.
It seems like the visual fidelity might be a way to like get your foot in the door to get people then engaged with the actual gameplay elements and other things, maybe like the physical simulation aspects of the game.
Yep. Absolutely. First you gotta get wowed with your eyes to kind of get pulled into the game. But you don't keep playing a game just because of what you see on your eyeballs.
Right.
It's how you experience in that game, what the mechanics are, what's compelling about playing that game. Because it is interactive entertainment, and the interactive part of it is fun. You don't just want to sit there and watch Madden, because you can do that on Sunday and watch your favorite NFL team, or Saturday and watch your favorite college team. You go to Madden to interact with it, have a fun experience playing the game. But we do feel like you've got to have that first visual experience, because if it's a bad visual experience, it'll distract you and you won't get to the fun and interaction. So it's both. It's definitely, if you're going to play hundreds of hours of Madden, which is what we want you to do,
Right.
it's got to have everything else, but I got to kind of have that. In some regard, you judge your book by its cover.
It seems like you're held to a higher standard though, because you brought up the point of no one's really seen like a rocket fired. But people watch football every weekend, so they kind of have expectations, I suppose.
And that's one of the things I think I use that to motivate people working on sports products, because while sports products defined the generation for PlayStation 2, that was the big title for PlayStation 2 for that generation, where everyone was playing sports products. Today, the biggest and most popular products tend to be Battlefield and Call of Duty. It's the first-person shooters. And sports products are not as, they're still a big business, still very popular, but the thing that's in the spotlight is more those first-person shooters. And that, so you might think that, wow, the toughest problems to solve, the best engineers need to be on those first-person shooters. Depending on what problems you want to solve, my claim has been, our sports products actually have some of the tougher problems to solve, because of some of those expectations where we know what's real and what isn't. And you could do a direct side-by-side comparison of RG3 in our game and from Google Images. So, we have some very tough problems to solve, even if the first-person shooters today culturally seem a little bit more sexy in terms of video games.
It just seems like people are more forgiving of like when Shepard does the shuffle versus like when RG3 is not behaving the way that RG3 would behave.
Yes.
What determined whether you push back the date of release other than just releasing a game that's not really concrete, like throughout the week? What determines that you push a date back for each release and then things later with an update?
Well, I'd like to never be in that situation for a sports product where you have to make a decision on should we push this date back, because basically we've done a bad job getting to the finish line, and this game's not going to be good, and it's not going to delight our customers. So, for our sports products, we never push back a ship date. I can tell you point blank, and we make sure, because of that, we make sure we do everything we can to never be in that situation where we have to make a decision about delaying versus just going with it. That said, mistakes are always made. There is no piece of software today that's in the video game industry that's completely bug-free. Bugs do go out. It's very normal in our industry today to do patches. I see that a lot. Most titles more actually have their own patch. When you get on with that list, it's ready, you're probably going to download a patch the very first day. And I see that with most titles. So there are always bugs that slip through, especially when you're talking about a title that sells, like it's something like FIFA or Battlefield that sells 10 million units or more. The amount of testing that you get on that product with 10 million people buying it versus the amount of testing we can do internally with our QA staff of 2,000. There's a huge multiple orders of magnitude difference there in terms of what we can reasonably test internally versus what our customers are going to find when they really start playing the game. 10 million different unique people playing the game in 10 million different unique ways. So bugs do slip through, and we do our best to basically have the data and information in front of us so that we can react when those bugs do show up and fix them quickly and put updates out. I will say, coming from the aerospace industry, where if you had a bug in a flight controller, that plane's going to crash and people are going to die. So you're trained to have no bugs and build in redundant systems so that if one fails, it's not catastrophic and there's a backup. There's marginal safety. So you talk about flight envelopes, prescribed flight plans, making sure that because if you make a mistake, someone's going to die. The good news in the gaming industry, if you make a mistake, no one's going to die. So you don't have that pressure. But obviously, you have the pressure of 10 million people that are waiting to play that game and want to have a beautiful experience. And you don't want bugs to slip through. But they will slip through, and it's our job to make sure when they're through, we react, get them fixed, and make updates.
And time for one more question.
I know that the community to run is based in Orlando, and I was wondering if there were like academic opportunities for students to intern or something, or do if so, do they work with the technology of Madden or any of the sports titles, or
Yep.
that's not there?
Yes, we have interns. We have interns all 3 semesters, spring, summer, fall. Anywhere from 10 to 15 interns every semester. At work in Orlando, working on either Madden, golf, or NBA. So that absolutely does happen. There's actually intern opportunities in all disciplines. We tend to have more. 60% of our staff is engineers, so we can have more engineering interns. We have a few design, art, and manager interns, and producer interns. But there's absolutely intern opportunities, and it is actually working on those parks and golf, basketball. So absolutely, and I would say, we have a lot of universities that we partner with very closely. We have FIEA as a graduate program. It's one of the places we have a really good relationship, and we get a lot of the interns from that relationship, and actually a lot of their graduates have been some of our most successful engineers recently. So part of the reason I'm here is actually to kind of help build some more relationships with UCF and kind of talk about opportunities for undergraduate programs to engage with us and look at intern opportunities as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, and Ken, thank you for the talk.